Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you this afternoon. My name is Patience Bertana, and I'm here to present to you Beyond Self-Care, Burnout Recovery and Prevention. This topic is near and dear to my heart. It's something that I've dealt with personally, and I've seen so many educators and colleagues and friends dealing with the effects of burnout, even before the pandemic hit. It's even more of an important topic as we look into how to move into yet another school year and end this school year as well. I'm sharing a presentation today, and I'll do most of my information will be in this presentation. So I'd love for you to have access to that presentation. You can find that at tinyurl.com/burnout-ed-gathering. And that will give you access to this presentation that I'm sharing and other resources that I will be sharing embedded within this presentation. So if you want to take a minute now to pause this video and go download that or connect to that, that would be great. All right, let's go ahead and get started. In addition to the presentation that I'm sharing from, there is also a workbook available for you to download and print. This workbook includes information including the burnout self-assessment that I will be sharing, as well as all of the note spaces from the information that I'm sharing during this presentation. So take a minute to download this should you decide to do so, or be sure to check it out after you watch this presentation. So a little bit about me, as I shared, my name is Patience Bertana. I am so excited to be part of this Ed Collab gathering and be among such amazing other presenters. I currently work as the Instructional Technology Coordinator in West Northfield School District 31. We're a small school district located in the suburbs of Chicago, specifically Glenview, Illinois. Prior to taking this role, I spent 20 years in another school district where I was a special education teacher at the middle school level. I was also an instructional coach and a technology specialist, all in the same school district. Over the course of my career, I have an undergraduate degree, but I also decided to get 3 additional master's degrees in education. I have one in reading, one in instructional technology, and I just finished my educational leadership. So I'm really excited about learning and teaching, and I like to get a lot of degrees. So in addition to having all of these degrees and spending the last 25 years in education, I found myself a year ago deep in burnout. I just wasn't myself. I was not a good educator. I was not a good colleague. I was definitely not a good mom and definitely not a good friend or spouse. And I really, really knew something needed to change. After a lot of work, I can safely say that I today am recovering from burnout. I think it's something that I will always be a piece of who I am, but I'm excited today to share my journey with you and share some of the research that supports those of you who might be in a similar situation. And hopefully you'll find some beneficial tips and tricks to consider as you look at your own path through education, whatever that may be. You can find me on Twitter at pbertana, and I also am on Instagram at Feed Your Creative Soul. All right, so that's enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about burnout. Oh, these pictures, so very true. In 2 short years ago, which seems like an eternity and a short window of time all at once, we've gone from heroes where we were doing it all and people were cheering for us and people were so grateful for what we were doing for their students, to today, it feels like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. I could never imagine that we would be where we are today in education. I love what I do. I love being a teacher. I love being an educator. I love supporting educators, but it's a really tough time to be in education. Now, a lot of people are trying to help us out. There have been attempts, especially in the last 2 years. We all know teachers love treats. And I always joke that you always can find some snacks in the teacher's lounge and nobody ever questions where they come from. And we will always eat the donuts or the cookies or a meal. And we're so grateful for that. We might even be so lucky. I have a former administrator I worked for who knew our coffee orders, and he would deliver our personalized coffee order, and such a great treat and something that was so appreciated, but doesn't quite solve my own burnout issues. And then there's one of my least favorite ideas, the idea of a gene pass. And I know many districts do them and many places do them. This is a new one for me, the leave early pass. That's another, way that we're trying to really look and take care of our teachers. Probably my least favorite is the idea of mandated self-care workshops, workbooks, professional development. It just doesn't feel quite right. We've got so much on our plates as educators, and having to be told how to take care of ourselves, it's really hard. And that's not really what we need right now. It's great to have all of these things. And I don't want to sound ungrateful because, as I said, I've worked with some great administrators who have really looked out and supported us. But in the end, it's really up to us to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, which is easier said than done. And here's the thing, self-care is different for all of us. It's really different. And it might be different for all of us on one day to the next day, and what we need might be very different. And I'm so grateful for all of those opportunities for me to take care of myself. But I'm also then in my head cataloging the list of all of the things that I need to accomplish and all the things I need to get done. So really, as the title of this presentation is, it's really more than self-care. It's about really taking care of ourselves through really knowing what's happening and making sure that we can protect ourselves from burnout. So let's take a look at exactly what burnout is all about. But before we can even do that, let's look at, how do we really know? What is it? So I've shared here, and I'll share a link to this as well. It's embedded in this presentation. So please, if you haven't already, take a minute to access this presentation. Again, you can find it at tinyurl.com/burnout ed gathering, excuse me. So again, tinyurl.com/burnout ed gathering. I had to think for a minute there. So, and you will be able to access, this is a clickable link, and you can get to this assessment. And this is just a small assessment with short number of questions. There are many burnout scales out there. There are some that have a lot more questions than this one I've chosen here. By all means, take care of yourself, find one that fits for you. When I found myself in a really dark place, the last thing I wanted to do was to take a really long survey. So this was just a good place to get started. And I do want to pause for a minute and put a little asterisk here. There is no replacement for professional mental health support. So again, if you find yourself in a place where you really need some support, please reach out to someone and make sure that you are getting the care that you need. All right. So what is burnout? So now that we've done a little assessment, and so let's take a look, what exactly is burnout? And interestingly enough, it was first defined back in 1975. It has since been researched by several researchers over the time, but they always come back to having three major components. Number one, emotional exhaustion. And this is not just the teacher tired, especially the spring break teacher tired. This is the deep fatigue that comes from caring too much for too long. And I think this is really tricky for those of us who are in education. A big part of who we are is we are givers, and we care for those that are in our care for those in our care. We take great pride in providing a supportive and nurturing environment for our students and for our colleagues. But sometimes that takes a toll on us. Number 2, depersonalization. And this is the one that really hit me hard. It's the depletion of empathy, caring, and compassion. I found myself getting to a point where I just really had a hard time being compassionate towards those I cared the most about, especially my family members. I really just was so bogged down in myself that it was really hard for me to really have that level of compassion that I typically really pride myself with. And number 3, decreased sense of accomplishment. This is a tough one. And this was one that was really hard. I think all of us have been impacted by this, especially in the last 2 years. There's this sense that no matter what I do, I can't make a difference. And it was easy to get here in the spring of 2020, or even the fall of 2020, where things were just constantly changing, and it felt like we were just spinning our wheels and trying to get ahead of things, and we just couldn't do it. But this goes beyond that, where you just have a sense of like, why am I doing this? And again, this is where I found myself at a year ago, and I knew that I needed to do something about it. So a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you today are from the book, Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Emily Nagoski and Amelia Nagoski. They happen to be sisters. I can't recommend this book enough. Or they also were on the Unlocking Us podcast with Brene Brown, I think about a year ago. And I was just really well done. There's amazing, amazing information. So a lot of what I'm sharing with you today is based out of this book. So I'm going to share a quote with you. And I don't love reading quotes to you, but I think this one merits me reading it aloud to you in the middle of a presentation. Your body, with its instinct for self-preservation, knows on some level that human giver syndrome, aka teaching, is slowly killing you. That's why you keep trying mindfulness and green smoothies and self-care trend after self-care trend. But that instinct for self-preservation is battling a syndrome that insists that self-preservation is selfish. So your efforts to care for yourself might actually make things worse, activating even more punishment from the world or from yourself, because how dare you? That's some heavy stuff there. And when you think about where we are in education and many of the platitudes out there, or many of the thoughts out there about teachers that we're in it for the outcome, not the income, which is all very true, but there's an idea that we just need to keep giving and being selfless. And if we are trying to take care of ourselves, then that's not what we're supposed to be doing. And that's just perpetuated this whole cycle where now we find educators who have been in the field for many, many years, or who are just starting out, who are just finding themselves at a point of burnout. So today I'm hoping to share a little bit about how you can prevent that if you feel yourself going that way, or maybe even start recovering if you're already feeling some of those pieces to your life. So as I said, a lot of what I'm going to share today is from the Burnout book, and so much of this is based on the idea of the stress response cycle. And this may not be new information to you. It was new to me, and the way that is presented in this book was just really enlightening to me, and was definitely a powerful tool in me learning how to take care of myself and recover and prevent burnout as I go forward. So this is kind of a big deal here. We talk a lot about stress and how we have stress in our lives, and it's so stressful and this and that. And really, we need to be able to differentiate between what is called a stressor and stress. So let's start by talking about a stressor. The stressors are the things that activate the stress response. They can be external or internal. So there are things like, the changing schedule for the 15th time this week, that difficult parent conversation you need to have, standardized testing. I don't know about all of you, but it's definitely starting here in Illinois very soon, and definitely on a lot of our minds. It can be that work-life balance. It could be trying to figure out how you're supporting your own family or your own children in the midst of trying to stay on top of all the things you're trying to do at work. It can be internal. It can be that voice in your head telling you, I need to do more, I need to do more. It can be the critical sense of your just self-critical criticism. All of those things are stressors. They are the actual things that are causing the stress. And these are all things that our body perceives as threats. And because our body is perceiving them as threats, it's acting accordingly. And that's when stress comes into it. So stress, in its actual definition, is the neurological and physiological shift that happens in our body when we encounter those stressors. So take a minute and think about the last time, hopefully not too recently, that you found yourself in a very, what you perceive to be a stressful situation, where there were those stressors, whatever that stressor might be. So take a minute and think about that. When was that last time? Okay, you got it? Now I want you to think about, close your eyes and think for a minute. What did that feel like? What was happening in your body? What was happening in your mind? What was happening with your breathing? What was happening in your muscles? I'm guessing as you start thinking through that, your breath started to quicken. Your muscles became tight. You might have even felt your heart start to race and your blood pressure start to increase, maybe even get that pounding headache. What is happening is your body is triggering the flight or fight. Even though you're not necessarily afraid that you're being chased by that angry parent, but our body still reacts to all of those stressors in the same way. The goal is always to move the oxygen and move the fuel to the muscles to escape. So in the book, and this example was such a good one for me, is the idea of our ancestors. And they were they were hunters and gatherers, and they might come across a lion or some other animal, a woolly mammoth or whatever it may be. And that animal is going to come at them and want to eat them, right? So the idea is, so you're being chased by a lion. Just picture it now. If you're being chased by a lion, you would imagine you would want to run. Most of us probably could not do the fight side of that. And so as you're running, your body is starting to bring the oxygen up, your muscles are starting to get the fuel, and you are running. All of a sudden, the lion is hit by lightning. No longer a threat. But yet our body, our heart is still racing. Our mind is still tense. Our muscles are still tense. It's because our body is still in that sense of high stress, high alert. In order for us to finish that, we need for our body to know that we are safe. So how does that work exactly? Well, let's think about this for a minute. Okay, so the lion is done, like he's been struck by lightning. The stressor, so he was the stressor, been dealt with, doesn't mean that the stress is gone. So let's read this. Just because you've dealt with the stressor AKA the lion in that example, doesn't mean that you've dealt with the stress itself. This is another big one, like, what? Because so often we think we've dealt with the stressor, we've taken care of it. We've gotten rid of our lion, whatever that may be, in the sense of a changing schedule or a difficult conversation we need to have with a colleague. We've dealt with that part, but yet why do we still feel this way? It's because we've dealt with the stressor, but we haven't dealt with the stress, the actual reaction in our body. And we need to have a way to do that. So let's talk through, what does that mean? How do I deal with this stress? I've dealt with the stressor, and sometimes there'll be stressors we can't deal with, but that's another conversation. How do I actually do this? How do I complete this stress cycle? Let's take a look at some examples from the book and beyond. So, as I shared, our mind and body need to know that we are safe so that the stress response can halt and we can return to normal body function. Again, in the example of the lion chasing us. Once the lion is either killed or gone, then our body needs to know, okay, I'm okay. I can go back to my normal heart rate. I can go back to my normal breathing. But our body needs to know that we are safe. And here's the thing, we can have all of these open stress cycles where we've dealt with the stressor might be gone or it may not be gone, but we just have this built up stress where we don't complete the cycle, where that's where we end up with chronic health issues. And that's where burnout comes in, because our body is constantly in this heightened sense of awareness. The fight or flight is constantly there, and we're never able to resolve that. And that's how many of us find ourselves in burnout. And when I think about the last 2 years, and as I dealt with different things that in my role as a curriculum coach and tech coach, there was a lot of stressors. And so often I would deal with a stressor, and some of them I could deal with, and some of them were just a fact of life. But often I did not take the time to close that stress response cycle. And that's how I found myself deep into burnout. So let's talk about some ways. The very first way, and I know if you're anyone like me, this is not what you want to hear, but we all know it. The best way to complete the stress cycle is to move. When you are taking physical activity, it's what tells your brain that you have successfully survived the threat and your body is safe. So in the example of the lion, we outrun the lion, he goes away, we get back to our village and our body knows we're okay because we're safe, we run, we're safe. Now in real world, 2022 world, the idea is ideally taking 20 to 60 minutes of physical activity every day. This can be tricky, but for many of us, we know this is what's best for our bodies and come closing that stress cycle. It is the best way for our body to know we're okay. So taking a walk, taking that walk on your lunch break instead of making copies or doing all the other millions of things, taking that walk on your lunch break, or making sure that you walk your dog when you get up in the morning, or taking a great Zumba class, whatever lights your soul on fire is the way to go. And really being intentional about that physical movement. Now, I know ideally 20 to 60 minutes, that's hard, especially as we've got work-life balance and all of those things. So really, any movement of your body is your first line of attack in preventing burnout. One of the things that can be really powerful is taking a 5-minute dance break. And they actually sell a little button that is like a dance break button that you push the button and you take a dance break. Go Noodle, a great Go Noodle activity with your classroom. These are things you could do in context of your class. take that time to move, take a walk around the building, whatever that may be, is one of the most powerful ways to do it. Now, in addition to that movement idea, sometimes that's just not possible. We've all heard the idea to take a deep breath. We all know this, but again, it's something we don't always practice and something that is really simple to put into place. Deep breaths down-regulate the stress response almost immediately. This idea is best used, obviously, when your stress is not at crazy high levels. However, if you're dealing with some deep trauma or some deep stuff, sometimes breathing is the easiest and the only way that we can get started. So it's also a great way to think about that. And one thing I like to think about with my son and with myself is the idea of box breathing. And this is where you simply take a breath in for a count of 5, hold it for a count of 5, breathe out for a count of 5, and then hold it for a count of 5. This can be just a powerful way to just get a sense of what, where you're at and really close that stress level and tell your body that you are okay. Sometimes this is done in the bathroom stall in the staff bathroom. Sometimes it's 5 minutes in your car on your lunch break. And sometimes it is literally in the hallway as you are walking out of a meeting on the way to pick up your kids from a special. But it's really being intentional about making sure that you're taking these steps. All right, so we've talked about moving and breathing. Here's another really simple one. The idea of positive social interaction. Now, sometimes when we are at that super stress level, the last thing we want to do is to talk to another human being. I know, I understand. But the research really supports the idea that casual but friendly social interaction, it's the first external sign that the world is a safe place. When we're able to have a friendly, like, hello, how are you? Have a great day. That's just a social norm that triggers our mind and body to tell us that we're okay. So next time that you've had a stressful day or some things, or you're just really at that point, think about just stopping and talking to the teacher next door and saying good morning, or waving, giving a smile to the custodian as you walk down the hallway, or asking your friendly barista as you're getting your venti coffee, how are you today? Have a great day. They can be simple as just a greeting, a compliment, a kind word, telling someone, hey, those earrings look great. It's those little things that we can do that really just, again, trigger our body to tell us that we are okay. Ooh, we've all heard that laughter is the best medicine. And really, in this case, a deep belly laugh really do work as medicine. It's not that superficial kind of ha ha ha, but a really deep laughter, or remembering a time when you had that deep laughter, can really help you complete the stress cycle. And if you have the opportunity to laugh with someone, that really builds those bonds and social connection. So think about, I know we all have favorite teacher comedians we love to watch on YouTube or Instagram, or there might be something that just really makes you laugh. An inside joke with a colleague. Sometimes just that moment of just either reminiscing about that laughter or actually laughing can really be powerful. And that only takes a few moments. Again, can be done, on the few minutes that, before you start your day, or as you're waiting to pick up your kids from specials, whatever that, those opportunities present themselves. Now we've kind of talked, other than the movement, we've kind of talked about some kind of what feels like superficial. We've got the chit chat, we've got laughter. And so now let's talk about, like, if this is something even deeper. the idea of affection. As human beings, we need that connection with other people. We are social beings. Having that connection, especially with someone who we love and respect and care deeply about, can be almost as powerful as that movement idea. Research suggests that the idea of a 20-second hug, which can be longer than you think, but 20 seconds of hugging someone that you care deeply about can actually change your hormones, lower blood pressure and heart rate, and improve your mood. So really just, again, making that connection to those people in our lives. I think so often we're so trying to keep that work-life balance, and that's important. But also just really reaching out to those that care about you is so powerful for both parties. So I challenge you this weekend, take and find someone that you care deeply about and try a 20-second hug and see how you feel afterwards. Now, as any pet lover can tell you, obviously our pets are also a great source of affection. Petting a cat, taking your dog for a walk, getting some puppy kisses are all other ways that we can get that sense of affection and connection that can help us relieve that or complete that stress cycle. Whew, this is a tough one, but so true. Now, we're talking about dealing with stress, not stressors. Obviously, we've always been told don't cry over spilt milk and don't cry over stress. But the idea of crying can really complete the emotional response cycle. Have you ever had a time where you barely get into your car, you close that car door and the tears just fall for a good 5-10 minutes and then you feel better? That's the stress cycle completing itself, where you're able to really just release that emotion and get it out and you feel better. Often, this just happens, but if this is something like you get that sense, like I just really need to get this emotion out to be able to close the stress cycle, highly recommend looking at one of those sappy movies. I'm sure everyone has the one that really makes them cry. For me, anything that has something with an animal that doesn't, usually makes me cry. So that's another option to consider, watching a tearjerker movie if you feel really stuck with that idea. This one is my personal favorite, the idea of creative expression. Much like movement, creativity is a powerful way to release emotion and to just for your body to reset. The arts create a context that really fosters and creates and encourages big emotions. If you've ever gone through a breakup, you know how moving songs can be, or how powerful it can be to just write and journal. These are all powerful tools to closing the stress cycle. Taking the time to create, paint, dance, sing, all of those allows us to work through our emotions and complete that stress cycle. This one happens to be my personal favorite and the tool that I used the most as I work through my own burnout. In fact, I've continued to make creative expression a daily practice for me as I continue to make sure that I stay healthy and that I'm able to complete my stress cycles as I work in my new role and make sure that I don't end up back where I was. So this is a habit that I have built and is part of who I am, and definitely something that is a valuable piece of my recovery process. You will find what works for you, and what works for you one day may not be what works for you the next day. But having these things in mind are powerful as you start to think about the next time you find yourself in a super high alert from all of the stressors around us. Think about some of these things and the ways that you can reset yourself by closing the stress cycle. So there are many ways you can complete the cycle. I've only shared a few of them from the book, but here's the key. You have to do something. Let me say that again. There are many ways to complete the cycle, but you have to do something. You can't just think about it and say, oh, I'm going to get over it. I'm over it. It's not in your mind. It is a physiological shift, and you actually have to physically do something. You have to create, you have to breathe, you have to move, you have to show affection, you have to do the positive social interaction. All of these things, you have to do something, and it has to be intentional. This is something I was never taught, something I never thought about. And as I have started to recover from burnout and continue through that process, this is something that is constantly in my mind as I'm thinking about the stressors and managing those stressors and managing the stress. Is how am I making sure that I am being intentional and I am doing something about the stress? So now that I've given you all of these, how do we find the time? Our days are busy. I am sure for many of you, I'm a working mom. I now commute 40 minutes a day each way for my job. And so there's not enough hours in the day. My son plays sports. We have an active family. We have an active community that we're involved in. There's just a lot happening. And I have a job that demands a lot of my time as well. And so how do I find the time to make sure that I am taking care of me? And it's not just about self-care. Yes, self-care is a big part of all of these things, but also now that I know that I need to be intentional about how I deal with my stress of my stressors, I need to have a plan. And so as I was doing some research and as I've worked through this process over the last year, I came across recently the research and the idea from Karma Brown called the 4% Fix. And so it's a great book. I am just going to scratch on the surface of this. I highly recommend it. It's a quick read, just a great thing to pick up, and just the ideas just make sense. So I'm going to cover just the very beginnings of this, but I highly recommend it. Now, my background is not in math, but the idea of the 4% fix is that it's 1 hour of your day. If you think of 24 hours, and so one of those, if you were to dedicate one of those a day to taking care of you, what does that look like? So we've all seen this image, or we've heard this image. Maybe some of you even have recently traveled. And you have been on an airplane and you've seen this. The idea is that we always put the oxygen mask on ourselves first before we help others. We know this. We know this. We understand this. But yet when it comes to our day-to-day and our daily lives, we don't always practice this. Especially as we're educators, we're always thinking we're givers. We give of ourselves and we just keep giving. As educators, we're givers. This is what I just said. And we often run out before we take any of ourselves. So let me talk to you a little bit about what I mean by this. And this example is in the book. You'll see I have a picture of a luscious piece of, or a chocolate cake here. I'm a definite chocoholic and I love chocolate cake. The idea here is if your day was a chocolate cake and you were to slice it into 24 slices, do you take your piece first, or do you make sure everybody else gets one before you take one? Yeah, that's what I thought. Often we give everything out and we just take what's left over for ourselves, which is even hard to say about chocolate cake, but it's true. We are just conditioned, and it's just who many of us are, is we want to give of everyone. And it's hard for us to give and give and give and never keep for ourselves. So the idea of the 4% fix is that if we wait until the end of the day or the end to take our piece, we're left with what's left over which often isn't much at all. Might be a few crumbs if you're anything like my house. I feel like that's what happens in my house. So the idea is that you want to start your day for you. And this is a tricky idea, and I get it. I get up early as it is and try to figure out my commute time and trying to get, my mornings are crazy here, as I'm sure they are for many of you, as I'm getting my son up for school, making sure my husband is off to his work job, making sure that my puppy is set for the day, and then getting our lunches and all of it. It's just so crazy. And then I get right to work, and chances are I'm hitting my email and there's all kinds of things happening, and I just jump into my day. And when I started to really think about this, if I were to take some time for myself in the morning, how that could totally change the way I do things. So before I was able to do that, if I think about what I was doing before, is I think about just go, 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 go. And then at the end of the day, once I get we've had dinner, we've gone to practice probably, I've taken the dog for a walk, and we've done all of those things. What's left at the end of the day is not a lot. There's not a lot of energy. And so I often find myself mindlessly scrolling and participating in numbing behaviors. And we all know it. I'm scrolling Instagram, I'm scrolling Pinterest, I'm looking at all of these things. And it doesn't do good things for us. The research, we all know the research. Many of you have probably seen The Social Dilemma and seen all of the pieces of that. It's not healthy for us, but yet that's what we've got left for ourselves. And that's what we do. So instead, what if we flip this? And we look at what we could do with an extra hour to start our day. All right. Now, in this, let me go back before I go into this. With the idea of this extra hour, I'll be honest, where I'm at now, it's closer to a half an hour. And the idea is that it's not really an extra hour, is that you're shifting yourself. So instead of having that end of day scrolling mindlessly, you're going to bed a little bit earlier. Yes. And so you're really taking that time and shifting it so that first thing in the morning, you're fresh. Your mind is fresh and clean, and you've got just the potential of the day. And so if you take that first little bit of time, what could you do if you had that extra hour? So for me, it is all about that creative expression. So I have time in the morning where I can journal, I can doodle, I can paint, I can do those few things before I jump into my day. And I find that I'm just in a much different headspace as I go about the rest of my day. It's still a work in progress and something I definitely am working on, and something that will definitely become a habit that I have to work at. So just a consideration for you as you think about that. One of the other ideals from the 4% Fix is the idea of really being intentional with our why. And I think as educators, this is really a powerful piece for us. Thinking about what is our why and what are our big four. And so the idea is, what are your 4 top priorities? So for me, my 4 top priorities in my life are my creativity, my family, my health, and my productivity. So what I do is each day, I think of a task with each of those 4 things. And those are my must-dos for the day, and the 4 things I try to get done. Now, these are not additional tasks to go into the tab, the mental list of things. These are just things that help keep me grounded as to who I am, and really the reminder of every day what matters most. Karma goes much more in depth in the book, and I highly recommend taking a look at it. But again, this has been a practice that has allowed me to really be intentional about how I'm spending that time in the morning, and also thinking about that stress cycles. Movement goes with my health. Creativity goes with that creativity piece. My family, that affection piece. And then finally, my productivity is just making sure that I'm on top of everything. And so it really connects back to that, but allows me to keep and make sure that I'm being intentional about embedding some of those pieces into my daily life. And I'm not perfect, but it has definitely helped and changed the way that I think about how I set my days. All right, so I've shared a ton of information with you, and I hope that you have some light bulb moments. That's the reason I chose this presentation template, that have really sparked some thoughts with you. So I love attending workshops and attending sessions like this, but then I needed a plan. And so I want to close up today with having you actually think about, how do I create a plan? What can I put into place? And again, at the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that there is a workbook that you can download and print that has some of these places where you can write these things out. Even as the instructional technology coordinator, I know the power of pen to paper. There's so much power in you writing things down that I highly recommend printing out that workbook and writing it by hand, whatever format that might look like for you. All right, so here's a couple of steps that you can take to implement a practice or practices to ensure that you have a plan for either burnout prevention or burnout recovery. Thinking back to those ideas that we shared about the stress cycle, what is your plan? Think about maybe one of each of those ways. How could you implement things in your daily life to be completing the stress response cycle? We cannot always control the stressors, and they will probably keep coming at us. But how can you set yourself up for success in closing that stress response cycle so that regardless of the stressors coming at you, you have the ability to take care of your own body and mind? I also highly recommend taking a consideration into looking at, what are your focus for? What are the 4 areas that mean the most to you? And then write them down on paper, commit them to paper, put them on a sticky note on your computer, put them somewhere where you can see them, and really reflect on that on a daily basis. How are you impacting, or how are you addressing those 4 focus areas each and every day? And then finally, my final recommendation is to really look into considering carving out time first thing in the morning. I know an hour seems undoable, but maybe it's even 15 minutes. How can you start your day with an intention and with a way to take care of you? How can you eat your cake first thing in the morning? How can you take your slice for you and make sure that you're putting that oxygen mask on you first? I hope this has given you some ideas. And again, I've referenced a few times, but I wanted to make sure to come back to the 2 books that really were powerful for me in my journey in burnout recovery, but also that I've shared as the content of this presentation. So first off, as I said, is the book Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. There are 2 different cover options out there for this. Another one is like a hot pink color, but I highly recommend this book as a powerful reference and just a great read. In addition, I said they were on Brene Brown's Unlocking Us podcast and several other places. There is a website linked here. If you click on the icon in the presentation, it will take you to the Burnout the Book website. There are discussion guides for the book, including one specifically if you wanted to do a book study with educators. So there's some really great questions there that I highly recommend taking a look at. The second book that I talked about was The 4% Fix. Again, How 1 Hour Can Change Your Life by Karma Brown. Another really powerful read that I just touched the surface on this one. So definitely highly recommend it. She talks a lot about the how to carve out that time for yourself. So definitely a powerful read. And I know we are busy educators, and trying to find time to read things for ourselves is really tricky, but I definitely think that these 2 are worth the time and energy to read them. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. I am constantly in awe of educators everywhere. My mission in life is to really make schools and better places for teachers and students. And you are a big part of that. I am in awe of what each and every one of you do each and every day to show up for kids and show up for our communities. And now it's time to take care of you, because we can't keep doing what we're doing if we're not taking care of ourselves. So thank you. And if you would like to find a way to get a hold of me, you can find me on Twitter. I am at Bertana. You can find me on Instagram at Feed Your Creative Soul. And I can also be reached via email at patience@patiencebertana.com. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here at the gathering. And I look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful afternoon.